We hear it all the time. Don't quit. Keep going. Winners never quit. Push through. And yes, of course, there are times where that advice is exactly what we need. But I also think we don't talk enough about the other side of things. Sometimes quitting isn't weakness. When walking away from something gives you space, energy, and confidence to step into something better, that's when quitting is powerful. Welcome back to Find Your Power podcast. I'm your host, Avery Jane. And in today's episode, I want to talk about how to know the difference between quitting because something is hard and quitting because something is no longer right for you or no longer aligns with who you are and who you want to be. And today I am just going to really dive right in. So, first, why are we so scared to quit? Well, we are in fact taught from a very young age that quitting equals failure. And that's fair. Sometimes it may, but we also have this strong attachment to things sometimes where it's not just something that we do, but we attach it to our identity and who we are. So things like a sport or our major in college or a job, a relationship, a goal that we have, or just a certain version of ourselves in a certain time period in our lives. Sometimes we stay because we don't want people to think we gave up. And sometimes we stay because we already invested so much time, so much money, and so much energy into something that it would feel like a waste to leave or give or quote unquote give up, right? So there's a lot of guilt that comes with quitting because it can feel like you wasted your time. But the truth is that I don't think time spent learning is ever truly time wasted. So even if something doesn't become your forever thing, it still taught you what you like, what you don't like, what you can handle, also what you actually do want. So I think a lot of people say this, and I've heard this around, but it's true. It's very true. Any time, money, energy that is spent working on yourself, whether that is learning, growing in a different environment or whatnot, it's never wasted. So, the biggest question you do need to ask yourself is just, are you staying because you genuinely want to be there? Or are you staying because you're scared of what people will think if you leave? And that's a really big one. Now, before I go any further into today's episode, I do want to be clear that I'm not condoning quitting things that are meant for you, right? So, this is definitely more targeted towards quitting things that no longer align with you. So, yes, not just quitting something when it gets hard. Because honestly, I mean, you can go back to my episodes. I literally have an episode on resilience and how we should be resilient and not quit and whatnot. So, this isn't to say that everyone's wrong when they say don't quit, don't give up. I'm just here to tell you, to give you the permission to maybe step into something different for yourself that you may feel is more aligned with you. If what you're doing right now doesn't feel aligned, it's okay to kind of step out of that. And if it helps, don't call it quitting, just call it pivoting. So, to really kind of clarify this difference between quitting because it's hard versus quitting because it's wrong, sometimes something is going to be hard. Most of the time, things are going to be hard if you are growing or if this certain thing is making you grow. And that is totally okay to stay in that. And I encourage you to stay in that if it is something that is encouraging you to grow. That really may be worth sticking with. On the other hand, something may be really hard because it's actually draining you, it's shrinking you, or it's pulling you away from who you want to become or who you wish to become. So that is something that may be worth leaving. I understand that sometimes it's a little bit difficult to kind of categorize which one of your hard is the thing that you are in. You know, what kind of difficult is it? Is it difficult because you're growing, or is it difficult because it's shrinking you? So I do have a little list here for you guys of things that maybe are worth sticking through versus things that may be signs that it's time to quit. So things to maybe stick through is if you're uncomfortable because you're new. That's a very, very common uncomfort, right? I don't think anyone is really comfortable completely into something that they've never done before. That's kind of unheard of, right? So if it's new, it's something you're trying out and it's new and you feel uncomfortable, don't quit it quite yet. I'll tell you, when I started this podcast, it very much felt uncomfortable, speaking in front of the camera and whatnot, and posting and editing and putting myself on the internet. That can be uncomfortable, and it was, especially in the beginning. But you know what? It was because I was new, and I told myself I gotta stick through this at least for a year. And I said that on a past episode, I'm going to at least stick through it for a year. Just because I said to myself, things are gonna be uncomfortable, and that's okay. That doesn't mean it's wrong. Another thing that might be worth sticking through is if you're still learning it, but you're not instantly good at it, or you still feel like you're not good at it, but you're still learning it, right? So that kind of comes with being uncomfortable in something new. It's very similar because when you start something new, if you're still learning it, then you're probably not going to be very good at it, and that's okay. You don't have to be good at something from the beginning to mean that it's meant for you. Most things you're not going to be good at from the beginning, but that doesn't mean that you can't get better over time. It doesn't mean that that's not something that you should do. I think we, I think in society sometimes portrays people as being so good at something and they were always so good at it. But the truth is, they just decided to not quit and not give up on that thing. They probably sucked in the beginning because they were still learning, but they didn't give up. If you are temporarily in a very stressful season in your life, maybe don't quit quite yet on these things that are going on, because there's a chance that it's just the stress of something else that is making you feel like you need to quit something that actually is pretty good for you. So just before you quit something, just evaluate, is this thing really what is causing my stress, or is this thing more of us on the sidelines and I'm just stressed about something else in my life right now? And if that's the case, then really kind of evaluate that maybe if you stick it out past this temporarily stressful moment in your life, then maybe you will be grateful in the end that you were able to stick it out, because you'll have that when you come out the other side. If the thing that you're doing or your thing you're considering quitting is if it still aligns with your long-term goals, don't quit it. Because this is something that still aligns with you and who you want to become. Even if it may feel weird right now, it may feel like a little off. If it still aligns with your future long-term goals and who you want to become, then you should stick it out. And lastly, if you still care about the outcome of this thing, even if the process is hard. So if you're working on something and you still really care about the outcome and working on it, even if the work that you're putting in is difficult, that's also something that is worth sticking through. Like for me, I still care about the outcome of this podcast, you know? And of course, outcome is a kind of interesting word to use for that because it's kind of never ending process as long as I continue it, but I still care about where this will go and where this will take me. So that's something that I'm not ready to quit because even though, yeah, the process isn't always easy, like I've mentioned, taking the time to plan episodes and film and edit and publish every week, it's not always so easy on top of all the other things that I'm doing, right? But it's something that I still genuinely care about, and it's something that I do want to see the outcome or the long term vision of. So I'm not going to quit it. So, on the other hand, I do have a few things that may be signs that it's time to quit for you. So, the first one is if you feel dread in this thing more than you feel it's a challenge. If you're thinking about quitting your job and you're feeling like it's just you just dread going in every single day and it's not really like a challenge that's pushing you anymore, could be a sign. Could be a sign to go. Or if you keep trying to convince yourself that you want it, that's not really a good sign either. That one is tricky though, because sometimes we don't know. Sometimes we really don't know if it's us trying to convince our own selves or if we really do want it. So that one is definitely something that you would have to really like do some self-evaluation with, to kind of realize if you are the one trying to convince yourself. But if you do come to that conclusion, maybe consider leaving that as well. If you feel like the thing that you're doing, that you're considering quitting, only really fits an old version of you. So, of course, people grow, people change, and that means that a lot of times we do need to quit or pivot things in our life to become more aligned with who we are in the present time or the future time. So, if you feel like the thing you're doing right now, maybe it's a job, I don't know, whatever it is, maybe it feels a little bit like more aligned with who you were 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 10 years ago. And if that feels like the case and it's not really something that aligns with who you want to be in the future, that's a sign to let go of it. If this thing is damaging your health, your confidence, your values, or your peace, definitely time to let that go. If you're staying only because you're afraid to start over, starting over can be really scary, and I totally get that. But if that's the only thing that's keeping you from leaving, sometimes you really just gotta do it. You just gotta quit. You just gotta start something new. And it's okay sometimes, like I'd say the best way to do it if you don't have like that buffer is to give yourself a buffer if you need to, like if you really want to quit a job, for example, but you're really scared to start over in a new job because you've gotten super comfortable in this job, that's totally fair. It happens. But if that's the only thing keeping you back, maybe keep this job, but like cut your hours back a little bit. And then while you're doing that, you can try to find something new if you do need that buffer. And the last one is if you're no longer growing, you're kind of just surviving. Not a good sign. Time to let that go. So, with all of this being said, I just want you guys to know there is a very big difference between this is hard, but I know why I'm doing it versus this is hard and I don't even know why I'm still here. Next, I want to talk about the make room mindset. So, sometimes quitting isn't about giving up on something, which hopefully that's what you're getting from this episode so far. But it's about making room for something new in your life. So, making room for maybe a better job, making room for more rest in your life, making room for a new dream that you have, making room for maybe even a major in college that just fits you better because you can't really, well, some people double major, but it's kind of hard to do that. So, maybe it's switching your major and that's okay. Maybe it's making room for friendships or relationships that feel healthier. If you're in a situation where you have some relationships or friendships that don't really feel good, if you leave those, you could find ones that are 10 times better and more healthy. Or also, it could just be making room for your actual life instead of the life you thought you were supposed to want. It's true. We only have so much time, so much energy, and so much attention in our lives. So if something is taking up all of that and giving nothing back, then you really do have to ask yourself what it might be blocking. At the end of the day, you can do so many things at once, but I've talked about this in past episodes. Managing your time for what is really right, and kind of sometimes you do have to cut back things in your life that you realize don't mean as much anymore or don't matter to you as much anymore. And that's okay. Making time for the things that matter more to you by cutting back the things that don't is very important. And it's a good skill to also have and to be able to kind of step back and do that. Kind of think to yourself, what would you have the energy to pursue if you weren't pouring everything into something that no longer feels right? Before you really quit, I do want you guys to make sure that you're not confusing temporary frustration with permanent misalignment, because it's true. I might talk all this talk about you should pivot and you might need to make more room for something else in your life, but at the end of the day, it could just be like a temporary kind of like setback that you're having. Or, like I said, a temporary stressful situation in your life that you're confusing with misalignment. And I get that, that totally happens, but I want you guys to kind of ask yourself these questions to help discover if this is something that is misalignment or is this something that is really just a stressful time right now. So maybe ask yourself, have I given this a real chance? Or have you given this a real chance? Or are you just leaving at the first sign of discomfort? Or maybe is this just a bad week, or has this been really a pattern for months? Does this thing align with the person that you are truly trying to become? Are you quitting because you're scared, or are you quitting because you're more clear than you were before? What would you tell your best friend if they were in this exact same situation? That is a really big one too, because thinking about it from an outside perspective can be really, really important. Do you need to quit, or do you just need a break? Maybe a boundary put up, or a conversation with somebody, or maybe even just a new approach at doing something. Not a complete quitting, not a complete quit. These things are important because not every uncomfortable thing needs to be quit. Sometimes you just need support, and that's okay. And sometimes you need better time management, which I talk about in the past episodes. So if you realize that that's kind of the issue, then totally go check that out. It could really help. Or honestly, sometimes you just need to ask for a little bit of help, and that's okay too. Sometimes you need to stop expecting yourself to be perfect immediately. If this is something new that you're trying, don't expect yourself to be perfect right off the bat. Nobody is. Nobody is. So, from this point, I've been kind of talking about quitting things in general, not so much targeted towards jobs, but I do want to kind of target this more towards jobs now because of course this is in fact Find Your Power podcast, and we do talk about career advice here. Jobs are tricky though, because we obviously need money and experience and references and stability, and we have bills to pay and we have responsibilities to fulfill. So, all that fun stuff. for that reason, I don't think just quit is necessarily very realistic advice. So that's why I kind of mentioned earlier that having kind of a buffer is a pretty good idea. Because I also don't think that staying in a job that is mentally destroying you should be glorified either, just because maybe it's pretty good money. So now I'll tell you guys some signs to think of or to notice that it may be time to leave that job. If you are constantly anxious before every shift, not a good sign. If you feel disrespected, undervalued, or unsupported, if the environment is toxic or unprofessional, and this one is especially like things like these, I would definitely go about, first trying to make the attempt to fix it, whether that's talking to the management or whatnot, or the person that you're feeling disrespected by. Talking to them first, approaching the problem where it's at first, like head first, whatever you want to say, is probably the best approach first. But then if it's still not solved after that, then I would say, yeah, it's time to leave that job. If you're not learning anything useful anymore, sometimes, I know that may sound kind of crazy, but sometimes, especially if you're around my age, like you're young and or you're like in college, you're in high school, you're fresh out of college, whatever it may be, if you're not really learning things in your job or learning things that you feel are useful, then maybe that job isn't as useful to you anymore. Maybe you're just being useful to the job. And sometimes that's really important, especially at our age. I think that learning is always important, no matter what age you are. Let me make that clear. But I just mean specifically towards people my age or the people that are younger, because we don't have these experiences yet, and also because we don't really usually know exactly what we want to do. And that's the exact point of this entire podcast. We don't really know what job we want to do yet. So if you're kind of in that phase of trying things out and you feel like you're not really learning anything useful to yourself anymore, and in this job that you're trying out, then maybe that is a reason to quit or to, find something different. If the job is interfering with your school or your health or your long-term goals, then yeah, it's time to quit. There are certain things that you do need to put before a job. And I know that's hard sometimes, especially if it's like a job that you're making pretty good money with. But at the end of the day, there are certain things in your life that should go first, certain priorities. And those are definitely ones that should be on the top of your list. I mean, in my opinion. If your values don't align with the workplace, that's something that can feel very misaligned, and that may be a reason to quit. Or if you've tried communicating or making changes and nothing improves. Like I mentioned before, if something feels misaligned and you've tried to correct it with this workplace and it's just still not budging, it's still not changing, there is your reason right there to leave. With this being said, sometimes a job is just a stepping stone, especially in your younger years, because not every job has to be your passion. And this can go for anybody, but sometimes you stay because it gives you experience, money, connections, or even a resume boost. But the key is to know whether the job is really serving a purpose or just draining you for no reason. Because a job doesn't have to be your dream job to be worth staying in, but it should at least be giving you something. It should be giving you experience, income, flexibility, growth, connections, or clarity. One of those categories, at least. But of course, I do have to mention, before quitting your job, please, please, please consider if you do have another job lined up or a plan, you can afford to leave. Maybe can you reduce the hours right now instead of quitting completely? Like I mentioned before, an idea of like a buffer. Or have you tried talking to the manager to ask for changes yet? Is this job helping your future or is it just taking away from your present time? And just lastly, please make sure to leave professionally. Um don't need to burn bridges down for that. I know sometimes leaving, quitting a job, you may be really upset, and a lot of people like to put on a show with that. But at the end of the day, you never know where those people are going to be in your future when you may see them again. So at the end of the day, just quit in a very professional manner, so you don't have to run into situations like that in the future. But I do want to be clear that quitting a job does not make you lazy, but quitting impulsively without thinking through your finances and your responsibilities and next steps, it can really create more stress for yourself. So the goal is not to stay forever, but to leave in a more clear and wise manner. Now that we talked about the kind of job perspective of this, I do want to talk about the identity perspective because like I mentioned in the beginning, a lot of times people do tend to tie their identity to things in their lives that they may later decide to quit or move on from. And that's why sometimes it can be really painful or really difficult. Sometimes because of this, quitting does make you kind of ask yourself, who am I without this? And that can be a really hard question. The first one is, who am I if I'm not an athlete anymore? And that is something that I have a past episode about. If you want to go watch that or listen to that, it is about finding your identity outside of your sport. So if you're in that situation, definitely check that one out. Maybe you're wondering, who am I if I change my major? Right now you're like, I don't know, say you're like an engineer major and everything you do and breathe and say and eat, sleep, breathe, live engineer right now. And then you're like, wait, this isn't for me anymore. And you want to go into, I don't know, business maybe. Maybe you want to go, or law. You want to go into law. And you're like, oh my gosh, but I'm an engineer. And that can feel really weird because then you're like, oh my gosh. I just realized I used engineer in like 2 episodes now in a row. I don't know why I'm using that example. But basically the point of this is just it can be difficult. Yeah, it can be really difficult if you define yourself by these things, or like by your job. Who am I if I leave this job? Or who am I if I stop chasing the goal that I told everybody about? Sometimes that just the fact that you told everybody about this specific thing is, it can feel a little bit weird when you decide you might want to do something different instead. But it's okay to outgrow a version of yourself. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to want something different than you wanted a year ago, or a month ago, or a week ago. Maybe not that soon, but definitely a year ago, definitely more than that, because we do change. And I don't know if we change every week necessarily from our goals. I would definitely stick it out for at least a few weeks. But yes, you're allowed to grow. And that doesn't mean that you're inconsistent. It means that you're paying attention to your life, and that's really good. So, my final advice about quitting is that just make sure that you are quitting with intention when you do decide to quit something, not impulse. So don't just quit because you're uncomfortable. Don't just quit because you're scared. Don't make the decision only from emotion. But also don't ignore your emotions either, because those are very important to pay attention to. So what may help is paying attention to patterns and also giving yourself permission to evolve. Kind of wrapping up the episode, I want to be clear that quitting is not always giving up. Sometimes it's honestly choosing yourself and it's choosing growth. It's could even be choosing peace. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is to admit to yourself that this is not for you anymore. And trust that making room is part of finding what is truly your power. That does conclude today's episode. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening today. Tune in every Thursday to listen or watch on YouTube or Spotify. And check out the podcast for audio only on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, and Audible. Make sure to check out the Instagram or the TikTok at findyourpower_podcast. And please rate the podcast 5 stars on Apple or Spotify if you do listen on there, or subscribe to the YouTube channel if you listen on there. I've been loving all the comments and the feedback and whatnot, so please keep it coming. If you have anything to say, I would love to hear it. Constructive criticism is encouraged, but, please be nice. If you do enjoy the podcast and you want to share it with a family member or a friend or anybody in your life that you think may enjoy it, please do so. They may thank you later for it, and it really helps the podcast grow. Also, if you would like to be featured for an interview or a conversation on the podcast, I did ask you guys last episode, and I'm going to ask again, what do you prefer? Do you prefer conversations and interviews, or do you prefer me just yapping in the microphone by myself? Please give me your opinion, because I do want to know what you guys prefer. I honestly could go either way. Sometimes it just depends on my mood, whatever I do, but recently I've been doing a lot on my own. So please do give me your feedback, your input, your opinion. I would love to hear it. But if you'd like to be featured, of course, then you can send me an email at the email linked in the podcast description section. And yeah, that's about it. Thank you guys again so much for supporting me. I really appreciate it, and it makes my day every time I read you guys' comments. So, of course, I will talk to you guys again soon next Thursday, and don't forget, we will find your power.